Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Aaron Guest. I'm a resident at Redlands and a volunteer with Accelerate Neighborhood Climate Action, better known as ANCA. This is the second event in our winter season series and educational programming called Resilient Living. Through monthly resilient living talks like tonight and how-to workshops, we hope to better equip all of us here in Redlands to face severe climate change. As you may know, ANCA's mission is to build climate-resilient communities, neighborhood by neighborhood. I think we can all acknowledge that these days that climate change is real, and it's a major threat to life here on Earth. Again, if you're not familiar with ANCA, our focus is try to prepare our communities for those realities. Our mission is to build community resilience and promote thriving neighborhoods. Now, tonight's discussion is going to be focused on It's local sustainable food systems. These are one of 10 vision elements that our group is promoting as part of resilient communities. So within local sustainable food system, there are many things that we can all be doing. They include goals such as increased neighborhood food gardens, increased household composting, increased household adopting plant-based diets, increased households purchasing locally grown produce, neighborhood compost piles, community gardens, and residents trading in food preservation. So you've all probably seen things like this around town. This is the fruit fly quarantine warnings, and they impact all of us here on Redlands. I personally live in the removal zone, so every time I come out of my house and go around the corner, I pass this sign. So we're going to have two speakers tonight who will be discussing about how vulnerable our food supply is. We're so thankful to have both speakers, Abby Harnett and Dan Klooster. Abby is a third-generation Redlands resident. She's an organic farmer and one of the founders of Three Sisters Farms here in Redlands. She was responsible for achieving the organic certification for the farm since its beginning in 2008. Her sustainable and organic practices include managing a diverse crop rotation, composting, micro-irrigation, native habitat restoration, low-till, hand cultivation, and the use of solar energy. Abby earned her degree in agronomy with an emphasis in sustainable agriculture from Cal Poly Pomona. Together, Dan and Abby will offer various perspectives on how changing environment is affecting our local food systems throughout the Inland Empire, and particularly here in Redlands. Their presentations will explore how we can do more to protect our vulnerable food systems and face climate disasters such as drought, disease, wildfires, floods, and insect infestation. I'm now going to turn it over to our first speaker, Abby Harnett.
Problem is, when I look out to see you, I don't need these, so I don't know. Thank you for coming, and thank you to Linda and ANCA for inviting me. I wanted to deliver a more hopeful message, so I decided to change the title of my talk from Threats to Our Local Food Supply to Building a More Resilient Local Food System. I'll start with the quarantine update to get the bad news out of the way. Then I'll move on to talking about our farm and local food. Part 1, the fruit fly update. At 554 square miles of San Bernardino and Riverside counties, the cooperative exotic fruit fly quarantine project has become the largest quarantine in state history. It also includes portions of Sacramento, Contra Costa, and Santa Clara counties. The offending insect is Bactrocera dorsalis, the oriental fruit fly or exotic fruit fly. Bactrocera fruit flies are classified in the Tephritid family, which are among the most destructive, feared, and well-publicized pests of fruits and vegetables around the world. The adult is a strong flyer, recorded to travel 30 miles in search of food and sites to lay eggs. This ability allows the fly to infest new areas very quickly. Important California crops at risk include pome and stone fruits, citrus, dates, avocados, and many vegetables, particularly tomatoes and peppers. Damage occurs when the female lays her eggs inside the fruit. The eggs hatch into larvae, also known as maggots, which tunnel through the flesh of the fruit, making it unfit for consumption. The male attractant technique is a form of integrated pest management, or IPM, that has successfully eliminated dozens of fruit fly infestations in California. It includes constant, extensive trapping and monitoring by state and county agencies. The treatment program is being carried out over 1.5 miles from each site where flies are trapped. As you may have seen, trained workers are stripping trees and removing fruit in certain core areas, as well as spraying a fruit fly attractant mixed with a small dose of pesticide in host trees. The male flies are attracted to the mixture and die after consuming it. Interestingly, the most common pathway for fruit flies to enter the state is by hitchhiking in fruits and vegetables brought back by travelers as they return from infested regions of the world, or in packages of homegrown produce from other states and countries sent to California. To prevent the spread of fruit flies, residents living in the quarantine area are urged not to move homegrown fruits and vegetables from their property. They may be consumed or processed by juicing, freezing, drying, or cooking on the property where they were picked, or disposed of by double bagging and placing in the regular trash, not the green waste. Out of over 500 species of Bactrocera, 53 are a threat to U.S. agriculture. 4 have become established in Hawaii and are a constant threat to the mainland. For example, the olive fly has become established in commercial olive production and ornamental plants in California and threatens to contaminate virtually all olives with its larvae. The USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service protects, also called APHIS, protects U.S. ag interests related to non-native threats. Their website features a number of the concerns they work with: 31 plant pests, 18 plant diseases, 26 animal diseases, 2 nematodes, 1 invasive weed, and various campaigns. They have a video series featuring this character they call Vinvasive, trying to hitchhike on uninspected plant materials, firewood, in luggage, through internet plant sales, and on outdoor equipment and vehicles. The ag inspectors and workers have a huge job, and it's only getting tougher, so they need our cooperation. On the flip side of this issue is the alarming decline of insect populations across the planet. A world without bugs would be a very different place, so we're in the precarious position of fighting them and saving them at the same time. We are slowly coming around to learning how to work with nature instead of against it. For solutions, we'll need to turn to our environmentally and tech-savvy younger generation who are taking responsibility for the problems they are inheriting and becoming ecopreneurs. As for how all this is affecting Three Sisters Farm, in 15 years of growing, this is the first time we have ever used a pesticide. There has been a learning curve. It was a little scary at first, but we feel we are helping to protect agriculture such as it is in our state and region. When the quarantine officially began in September of last year, our fruit crops were vegetables: tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, zucchini, eggplant, and butternut. The fruit fly does not discriminate. They are all potential hosts for egg-laying females. We stopped harvesting and sales of those crops for 30 days while we completed 4 treatments. Then we were able to bring them back to the farmer's market enclosed in safeguarded containers. If a fly is found within 1.5 miles of our site, we will be notified immediately and will no longer be able to treat or sell our unprocessed fresh fruit. We're now starting the seeds for this summer's vegetable fruit crops and hope to remain fly-free. We continue to carry out and report our treatments every 7 to 10 days in the presence of an ag authority in accordance with the compliance agreement we signed for CDFA and the USDA. The active ingredient in the pesticide being widely used is called spinosad. It is derived from a naturally occurring soil bacteria and is permitted for use on certified organic crops. The non-organic option is called malathion. It's an organophosphate. However, it has a 7-day re-entry period versus 4 hours for spinosad. So most growers are choosing to treat with the less toxic material to avoid harvesting delays. This includes the county and the state. They're using the spinosad treatment. As expected, the cold winter temperatures are currently reducing the number of fly finds in the traps. If the control measures are as effective as they have been in the past, the projected end for the quarantine is August of this year. Part 2. Our experience with the quarantine has mostly been a minor inconvenience. The financial impact has not been significant. This is because we are a small, diverse farm that sells direct and does not rely heavily on any one type of crop. At the height of our fruit production season, we also have several varieties of lettuces, greens, root crops, and fresh herbs to bring to market. This brings me to the topic of sustainability and the role of the small local organic grower. In case you aren't already familiar, Three Sisters Farm is located on 20 acres in Santa Mateo Canyon and has been selling our certified organic produce directly to the consumer through one farmer's market and a 25-member CSA for 15 years. The garden is about 2 acres. Jason and I supply the full-time labor, and our 2 kids help out. We make our own compost with horse manure delivered by the neighbor, which is our only soil amendment. We micro-irrigate with solar timers, direct seed most crops, and hand weed our beds. We're sequestering carbon by maintaining vegetative cover on 15 acres of fallow land. We keep our produce local and sell only in Redlands. Much of our electricity comes from an on-site solar array, which powers our home, farm, and charges our delivery van. We are restoring native vegetation and providing habitat for beneficial wildlife. Our diverse crop rotation balances soil nutrients, prevents pests from establishing, and supports the predator-prey cycle. The native perennials, shrubs, and trees that surround the garden are a crucial component of our organic practices. The flowers are important too. The flowers we plant for cutting, the flowers on the weeds, and the flowers on the crops we leave behind when we finish harvesting. They are beacons for the beneficials. Speaking of weeds, many of them are edible and nutritious. Purslane and lamb's quarters are 2 of the most nutritious plants, more so than kale and spinach. We accept that we will never win against them, so we consider them wild greens and inform our customers about their impressive levels of vitamins and minerals and high omega-3 content. Unlike our cultivated favorites, the weeds we battle in our gardens have adapted to survive the harshest of conditions. Those young ecopreneurs are sure to find some important keys to survival in their genetics that will help us get through these challenging times. In addition to one farmer's market that we attend, our other sales outlet is the CSA. It stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and it has become a vital key to survival for the small farm. Growers around the country who can't stay in business wholesaling are turning to the consumers in their surrounding communities for support. CSA members value knowing their food is grown on a local farm, that their produce is freshly harvested, and we value their appreciative words and their enthusiasm for what we do. Their upfront quarterly membership fees make our business viable and rewarding, and they are voting for local agriculture with their food dollars. When we have a pest outbreak or crop failure, we can fill in the gaps with whatever else is abundant, and our members and customers learn to use surplus veggies in new and different ways. Another benefit of CSA membership is learning to cook and eat seasonally with the crops that grow well locally. For example, one year, a small beetle called bagrata came pouring out of the ground and attacked our brassica crops. Eventually, we realized that we needed to stop planting their favorite foods, so we replaced those crops with temporary alternatives and have added some new heat-tolerant greens to our crop rotation. We still have bagrata bugs, but their population has stabilized and we have learned to live with them. Another time, a horde of armyworms, fed by a flush of weeds from a freak summer storm, destroyed several of our new crops. So we put the CSA on hold while we kept the weekly farmers market going, and our loyal members were there when we returned. Weather extremes are one of agriculture's greatest threats from climate change. Superstorms and prolonged heat and drought are realities that we face. As sustainable growers, we will continue to adapt and do our best to be prepared. We consider the small scale of our farm and business to be an advantage that contributes to our sustainable efforts. We can quickly make adjustments and avoid some of the issues that the big guys can't. We're efficient with resources. We eat lower on the food chain, so to speak. Doing our own hand labor literally puts us closer to the ground and more in tune with the subtle changes of the plants and the land. We can identify and monitor our flora and fauna populations, and we recognize their contributions to the health of our farm. 15 years into our farm adventure, and we are still learning. Maintaining a diversity of annual vegetables is labor-intensive and requires constant turnover. With sustainability in mind, we have begun to incorporate more perennials into the farm. We've added crops like nopales and asparagus and mini orchards of figs and mulberries. We continue to be inspired by witnessing nature, and we look forward to the future lessons she has to offer. By the way, if you would like to see it for yourself, we are offering a tour of the farm and our straw bale buildings as part of ANCA's Earth Day activities on April 20th. There will be a sign-up link on the website in coming weeks. Part 3. A farmer's market is a perfect example of a thriving microcosm of local food and local culture. It's a food hub in essence, where small local producers gather every week to sell their homemade offerings. In addition to all the great food, you can find community. Customers have shared that they look forward to Saturday morning all week for the chance to gather in the presence of food and families and share their stories. Often it's the people who have recently moved into town who come to the market seeking the freshest produce and a unique perspective on their new home, a slice of the local population. They come to vote with their food dollar, shop small, and shop local. We've seen several vendors start out with a stand at the farmer's market and go on to open their own brick-and-mortar store or restaurant. So the farmer's market is an incubator for local food businesses. One of the hottest items at our market is the mushrooms from Manna Farms. Lion's mane, chestnut, shiitake, and a variety of oyster mushrooms like golden, king, and blue. These gourmet beauties are grown in Riverside and are a delicious treat for your dinner table. Another hot item is the croissants baked in a home kitchen by Redland Sourdough. The proprietor has a day job, but he is up all night passionately baking his amazing pastries to bring to market on Saturday morning. I am a little jealous of the lineup at his stall, and he sells out early every week. Stillman Avenue Bread is another fantastic home baker who has recently brought his artisan loaves to our market. Gerard's Market also sells his loaves, and you can order through his Instagram and pick up at his home. The Cottage Food Act of 2012 has opened up these new opportunities for small-scale food entrepreneurs to launch their businesses without the financial burden of expensive commercial kitchens. The law aims to support the growth and success of these startups by easing regulations and is fostering communities of passionate, home-based food producers who are financially and creatively empowered. California cottage laws have had a profound impact on the state's food landscape. Anyone can bring unique artisanal products to market thanks to the flexibility provided by these laws, and consumers have benefited from increased access to locally made, high-quality food items. Redlands Olive Avenue Market is the weekly drop-off location for our CSA shares. It's a neighborhood coffee shop that supports us and welcomes our customers in to pick up their produce. Sadly, the neighborhood market has gone the way of local hardware and bookstores. OAM has hosted art, music, and cultural events and has featured many different pop-ups, cooking outside on a rotating schedule. One couple calling their business Happy Medium's Deli will soon be opening their own storefront in Calamasa. Another example of a food business incubator. The city should consider residential rezoning to allow the return of the neighborhood market. A small store within walking or biking distance gets people out of their cars and provides a quick bite, a meeting spot for friends, and another opportunity to connect with community. Rolling Hills Herbs and Heirlooms is an urban nursery selling vegetable starters for the home gardener from a backyard farm. These unique varieties are a beautiful addition to your edible landscape. These are all shining examples of participants in our local food system, and the major threat to them would be that they do not receive enough support from their community. They cannot compete with Costco and chain restaurants. Their passion and creativity should be celebrated and rewarded with an enthusiastic and supportive following. As individuals and families, the most important thing you can do is vote with your fork, and we have 3 opportunities every day. This means making climate-friendly choices about what we eat, and it also means voting with your food dollars by building up and participating in the local food movement in all its forms, thus making it more resilient. As a group, ANCA can lobby the city to be a leader and hire a sustainability manager. ANCA could also work with the city to update ordinances and zoning to support and encourage residents to grow food wherever it makes sense, even in the front yard. People need to be allowed to keep a few laying hens in the backyard. Families should be able to experience the magic of producing food for their own table. This will help our kids connect with their food and with nature firsthand, creating lots of inspired new food producers to build our resilient local food scene. Finally, the region needs more small farms. Here we are in sunny Southern California, where there is a rich agricultural heritage, and today there is such a scarcity of farms and farmland. I look around and wonder, where did all the farms go? This is where those young people come in again. We need to be raising more young farmers. Now, more than ever, we need to foster a connection to nature in our children. Kids who care about their own little piece of the planet will be more likely to care about the health of the planet as a whole. The backyard is the perfect introduction to nature studies through gardening. We all need to become farmers. Adopt a farmer mentality. Backyard farmers, community gardeners, grow something, produce something you can share. Bring something homegrown into the kitchen and notice how much more meaningful it is than just buying it from the grocery store. Anyone can plant a few seeds and sprout some inspiration. Resilience comes from the collaborations and connections we make as a community of concerned neighbors. We can change a lot on our own, but working together is even better. I'm so glad Redlands has a group like ANCA to give residents a chance to make a difference together, and I look forward to seeing all the positive changes in the future.
That was fantastic. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Dan Klooster. Dr. Klooster is a professor of environmental studies at the University of Redlands. He holds a PhD in geography from the University of California, Los Angeles. He regularly teaches classes such as food and nature and environmental justice. Can you just give us one moment?
Well, hello everybody. It's good to be here, share some pessimistic and some optimistic thoughts with you. And following Abby is a chore because she lives a life. She provides a contrast, her family provides a contrast to the story of conventional agriculture that I want to tell today. So that's what I'm going to say. And the first point is maybe a little bit odd, but I'm here at a conference about climate change, talking about food. And every time we take an environmental variable like climate change, and we think about food availability following that, we think that one causes the other. And I just want to remind us that our food supply is a social thing. The way that Abby described working as a community member, the presentation that she just gave where she shouted out her competitors who also sell food from this region is really indicative of what we need. The way that she talks and makes us visualize our food system as being a community of interactions and not just an economy is really important. So starting with that first idea, when we think about food and population and climate, it's good to step back a minute and think about the 1970s. Many of us remember it, some of us better than others. So in the 1970s, things looked really grim to thoughtful environmentalists. Populations were growing exponentially. Families were huge. The predictions of future populations were terrifying. There was no way the planet could support the populations that were expected in 1970. Lifeboat ethics, protecting what we've got from them, seemed like the only possibility for rational thinkers at that time. Not all of those environmentalists, but some. But that crisis didn't happen the way that it was expected. Yeah, human populations more than doubled in that time. But agricultural output also increased exponentially. And calories per person since 1960 and 1950 have actually increased. So if you look at the slide, there were 3 billion of us a few years before I was born in 1960. And at that time, the world population, well, it's the middle of those lines there. The world population at that time was, I can't say, it doesn't matter. The world population had a per capita calorie availability of like 2,300 calories per capita. By the year 2000, the year my daughter, who just graduated college, was born, there were 6 billion people on the planet, twice as many. And yet, there was more food available per person at that time than there was in 1960. Now, 7.8 billion people on the planet. And the amount of food available per person has actually increased for all regions, everywhere. And one of the reasons that that is the case is because of a miracle of modern agriculture and technological development. Corn harvests in 1940 was 2 tons per hectare. Then we had World War II. And then we had all of those amazing munitions factories that could be converted to making nitrogen fertilizer. And industrial agricultural processes picked up. Plant breeding became very effective, and the productivity of corn increased to 10 tons per hectare now. During this time period, however, we also saw an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. We usually think of climate change as being something that's caused by carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is the main contributor to climate change. Climate change, I remind you, is a simple kind of energy balance question where we have an atmosphere which is transparent to sunlight, but insulative of the heat when the sunlight turns to heat. And it doesn't take a huge difference in the chemistry of our atmosphere to change that. Carbon dioxide is the most important greenhouse gas by volume. But these other greenhouse gases that are on this chart, the yellow line is methane, CH4, methane. That is extremely insulative. It remains transparent to sunlight, but very good at trapping heat in our atmosphere. And nitrous oxide is also very insulative. So those are greenhouse gases that are the main contributors of the agricultural system to global climate change. So what are some lessons from this crisis that wasn't yet? Population growth by itself from 1960 to 2000 to now to up to 2100, when populations are probably going to stabilize, has not been the cause of hunger or scarcity or famine or anything else. Social organization creates continued hunger, overnutrition in some places, undernutrition in other places because of our social organizations. And technological innovations have created immense abundance for some, overabundance for many of us. But this industrial agricultural system degrades the ecosystems on which it depends, and on which we depend too, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a couple of snacks. So the second main point that I want to make is that the food system is disrupting the climate. Industrial, conventional agriculture is not anything like what you just saw on those beautiful slides that Abby shared with you of Three Sisters Farm. It is large fields of a single crop of a high-yielding plant, which has been carefully bred to be super productive under ideal conditions, perfect conditions, where it has all the water it wants or needs because there's irrigation, where it doesn't have to worry about competition because there's herbicides, where it doesn't have to worry about predation because there's pesticides, and where it doesn't have to worry about soil nutrition because there's chemical fertilizers. All of those things, those monocultures of high-yielding varieties, are they produce a lot of greenhouse gases. And in addition, our agricultural systems have taken animals out of the integrated traditional agricultural systems and moved them onto feedlots and produced meat in vast quantities inexpensively. And so maybe a third of greenhouse gas emissions made by human beings are from the agricultural system right now, from the food system. Maybe 21 to 37%. There's different estimates depending on what you put in your model and what you put out your model and what numbers you're using. But that's a lot. That's more than transportation for almost any country. Similar to energy sector in the United States, for example. A lot of that is from fertilizer production. Fertilizer comes either from mining, phosphate deposits in a few parts of the world, and we're running out of phosphate, or it comes from ripping nitrogen from the atmosphere, mixing it with a lot of energy, a lot of natural gas, to make that nitrogen ammonium and eventually nitrates and forms of that atom, which are accessible to plants and essential for our nutrition. And it's a process that creates this nitrous oxide, methane, and carbon dioxide that I mentioned a minute ago. So we're not going to solve the climate problem until we change our agricultural system. Let me get into this in a little bit more detail, and I might skip some slides so we can talk a bit more. If we think of the food system as part of an agricultural system, the top of this diagram has land use change. So we cut down a forest or plow up a prairie, and that produces greenhouse gas emissions. Some of that land we're going to use to grow food for human beings. Other parts of that land we're going to use to grow feed for animals. And then we have a crop production system where we're using a tractor and irrigation and chemical fertilizer. And then we have perhaps that big green thing, which is livestock and aquaculture. So if you look at all of the parts of the agricultural system that are used to support animals, it's about 52% of all of the agricultural emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions related to food that we eat directly, as opposed to an animal that ate food, plants that we eat, is like 30% of agricultural emissions. If we look only at the amount of agriculture which is production, not counting deforestation and not counting transportation and so on, then we get this other bar graph. This bar graph to the one to your right would correspond to those three main components in the middle of the previous bar graph, right? And the biggest one there is enteric fermentation, which is a fancy word for cowbird's. Cows, sheep, goats are amazing animals which have an exquisite digestive system, which takes a cellulose-rich product, grass, leaves, ferments it in a belly, and extracts energy from that stuff in a way that we can't. Termites do this too. There's also methane produced from rice production and from manuring and things like that. But a lot of methane production is simply lots of cows and other ruminants eating stuff and digesting it. It's something we cannot do. So meat is a major part of the impact on the climate from our food system. But at least we eat it. Another major part of the food system is food that we don't even eat. So globally, a lot of food is left in the field. Some food reaches a household and doesn't get consumed. 25 to 30% along the whole stream globally. In the United States, about a quarter of the food that reaches a plate, or at least a refrigerator, or at least a cupboard, doesn't get eaten. And all of the emissions that are related to that food didn't do anybody any good at all. So my third major point is that climate change disrupts agriculture. So what does climate change do? It makes heat waves much more frequent and much more severe. At higher temperatures, up to a certain point, plants like it. Their metabolism works away. They don't like it really cold, but they don't like it too hot either. They can't photosynthesize well. The process of photosynthesis can break down. Soils become drier at higher temperatures, even if rainfall is exactly the same. So the rates of evaporation increase. So there's just all kinds of stress on plants, on animals, and boy, one of the key components of an agricultural system are the farmers and the field workers, right? And they can suffer immensely during heat waves. And of course, rainfall patterns change. Sometimes it doesn't rain, and plants don't like that. Sometimes it rains too much, plants don't like that either. And man, all of that changes to the hydrological system is happening on top of a system where we're mining groundwater in many parts of the world, extracting it to grow food for animals, in the worst of cases, food for people sometimes, at a rate much faster than the water gets back into that groundwater. So we're mining water for the agricultural system that we have now. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is actually a fertilizer. Photosynthesis takes sunlight, carbon dioxide and water, and produces chemical energy and glucose. That's the essential process that runs all of our ecosystems and our bodies right now. And more carbon dioxide makes plants grow better, but at the cost of the nutrition of that plant. So it changes the nutrient quality of the plant and affects the soils in some ways as well. And back to the fruit fly. Climate change changes the distribution of pests, including some nasty things like funguses, not the delicious ones we saw a moment ago, but the kinds that put out alpha toxins and things like that and can affect storage of food and so on. So lots of things that happen. Heat stress affects workers. That's why I put this slide in here to make me say this. So heat stress is one of the things that affects our farm workers that we do not regulate very well at all, because we are sometimes challenged in our political and economic system to think of them as human beings. So these stress, back to plants. So these stresses affect the yields of plants and they accumulate. So climate change brings with it reduced soil nutrients, increased pests, diseases, decreased rainfall, ozone, heat stress. Under the worst case scenarios, which unfortunately is business as usual, under the business as usual scenario, farmable area by 2100 might decrease by as much as 30%, especially in the tropics. If we look at two nice plants, soybeans and wheat, the big map on the top for each one of those two plants is like the cumulative stresses, and then the different stresses from soil nutrients, pests, heat, aridity, ozone, are in the subsequent kind of global maps. And in both cases you see globally a lot of stress, but I also see a lot of stress particularly in tropical areas. Let's see, I think I'm going to, let's watch this. I did not. This is corn. This is a worst case estimate of corn yields by 2070. And again, you see that the areas where it seems to be affecting us most is tropical regions. We get a lot of migrants from Central America, and that's one of the places which is being affected by climate change and political instabilities and histories of various things as well. So our food system has been global for a long time, and that gives us a certain amount of stability, because if there's a bad harvest in Argentina, we're probably okay, because there's an okay harvest in Ukraine. If there's a bad harvest in the United States, we've got Australia and Europe and Argentina and other places. And so it goes. So good harvests, maybe a bad harvest. Good harvest, maybe a bad harvest. But this global market reduces our dependence on biodiversity to 3 crops that provide half of our calories. And for each of those 3 crops, there's basically 3 countries that provide about 40%, that produce about 40% of each one of those crops. And food crises happen. 1972, there was a heat wave in Russia, Ukraine. They had to open their economic system to imports from the United States because grain prices tripled because of that harvest failure. 2007, 2008, there was a heat wave in Australia. Seems like not nearly as big of a shock to the system, but grain prices during that time doubled as well. So the concern, well, here we go. The food shocks that we see come from droughts, heat waves, floods, storms, pest outbreaks. And we see the frequencies of all of those kinds of things increasing. The 2022 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on the land system and climate suggests that we are already seeing climate change effects on the agricultural system. And the incredible increases of productivity that we have seen historically are starting to level off and would have been even greater without those kinds of shocks. But those shocks are increasing in frequency. And so what happens if we get a failure here and a failure here and a failure there? The fear of simultaneous crop failures is of great concern. Looking forward, the way that the food problem is generally framed now, at this point, is population continues to grow. 7.9 billion right now, probably 10 billion by 2050, 11 billion by 2100. But not only is food consumption going to go up because there's more people in the world, this framing, this narrative goes, food consumption will also go up because we'll be eating more food per person, because the meat production goes, or the meat consumption tends to go up as countries develop. The amount of meat consumed in China, as China became less poor, has gone up quite a bit with global implications. So the yields will need to go up to meet that demand, is how this is usually framed. And yet we expect yields to become more volatile at a minimum and probably to decrease overall. Simultaneous crop failures, kind of hard to cushion against. Through agricultural system that will continue to produce a lot of greenhouse gases. Another food system is necessary, because that framing is not very helpful, not to me anyway. So moving forward, we can think, first of all, let's do what we need to do. Let's make this energy transition that is waiting to be had. We just need to push just a little bit more. We're so close to a tipping point in the energy system. We could support continued leveling off of population growth, maybe make it go a little bit faster by supporting especially the poorest countries, especially women in the poorest countries where family sizes have come down but are still high. So a woman-centered development policy could have a great effect on empowering families to be smaller, to be the size that they want to be. And the bad news is we eat a lot of meat and we waste a lot of food. But the good news is there's a lot of cushion in the system because we eat a lot of meat and we waste a lot of food. So, I kind of would like to resist the framing that says what we are doing now socially is what we need to be doing is what we will be doing in the future. And therefore, we need to more than double food production. So it's going to be GMOs and more chemicals and more miracle of modern agriculture. Yeah. I don't know. If we just ate healthy. What if we just had landscapes that looked less like a monocrop of corn and more like the beautiful farm at Three Sisters, where there's a variety of different plants, a community, an ecology, growing together and working together and producing a lot of nutritious food. So we could do these reductions and we could strive for a just social organization. We need to avoid a lifeboat mentality that says, let's keep those hungry brown people on the other side of the border because we only have so much water or whatever resource we are concerned about. And instead, work to empower farmers in Central America to produce nutritious food there and not be wiped out by cheap exports from a food system in our country which is incredibly subsidized. We could move towards an agroecological food system where, I was going to throw this as a softball to you, Abby, where we have an ecological form of agriculture, which is modern, and which is scientific, but which is inspired by things like the Three Sisters, the name of your farm, and the holy trinity of corn and beans and squash and amaranth and all kinds of other crops that grow together and produce a lot of nutritious food while protecting soils, while enriching soils by capturing carbon. We could promote sustainable diets. We could replace an industrial logic with an ecological logic and a community orientation, as Abby kind of talked about. This would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the need for chemical fertilizer. This would reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it would have less meat, not zero, but less meat. Animals are part of well-functioning ecosystems, and I think we can eat them sometimes. It will have healthier diets with less waste. It'll capture carbon. There'll still be carbon emissions from agriculture, but net carbon emissions could be negative. Meaning, if we had an agricultural system that was organized around things that really matter for the future, we could do a lot of amazing things and have a better climate and a healthier diet. The money to do this is there. The agricultural system that we have right now is heavily and incredibly subsidized. It didn't come from nowhere. It was built over time by policy decisions. $600 billion of subsidy to industrial agriculture at a world level, according to a World Bank estimate. And then, if we're worried about security and global security and having contented populations that have, 3 sound meals a day. If you think about other things that we do to protect ourselves and compare that budget to a military budget, that's a lot more globally. Linda shared an article with me that did some back-of-the-envelope estimates of how much a healthy food system could save from health, mostly from health actually, but also from environmental damages. And I only talked about climate. I didn't talk about the nitrogen cycle or eutrophication or water pollution or soil erosion or any of those things. That could be $13 trillion a year if we had an agricultural system that fed people and soils instead of malnourished people and degraded and eroded soils. So we could use existing resources to build a better future. It could happen. This is what I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. That was very educational. You know, sometimes it seems that these problems are very real and very scary and very overwhelming. But as Dan mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity here. And that's where ANCA hopes to fit in building community climate resilience at the neighborhood level. And that's where we see hope, like Abby and Three Sisters, that there's a lot of opportunity here for us as neighbors at this local level to build community climate resilience, to vote with our work, to promote these things that will better enable us to handle these effects that are real, and they're coming. So there's a lot of decisions being made here in Redlands. We often get questions of, okay, well, so what about it? What should I do about it? What's happening here in Redlands? So I'm going to have one announcement from Bob Knight about things that are happening these days. We're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to do announcements for Linda, who's going to be doing events that ANCA's involved in, that again, get folks out involved, trying to build climate resilience at the local or neighborhood level. So here's Bob Knight.
Okay. My name is Bob Knight. I'm a farmer. I farm 14 acres in the Crafton area of Redlands, and I farm 67 acres in Santa Mateo Canyon. If you've ever been in Santa Mateo Canyon and you've seen those orange groves, a big chunk of those are mine. And I'm a certified organic grower, okay? And I have for you today a delicious call for action that's going to be so satisfying, it's going to be immediately available to you, because we found out yesterday that Tuesday, the City of Redlands Planning Commission is going to meet to assess a redefinition of what's going to be allowed on agricultural land in the City of Redlands, okay? Now, why is this so amazing? Because the land uses for ag parcels in Redlands are antiquated. They were basically defined back when the only thing anybody ever grew in Redlands was oranges. And now for the first time we have the opportunity to redefine the type of agriculture that we want to have within the city. Okay, so I want to give you an idea of how bad it is, okay? First of all, let's talk about chickens, okay? My core farm is in Santa Mateo Canyon. The Santa Mateo Creek runs right through it. Right on the other side of the creek from me is a housing development, okay? Those people that have 1/8 acre, 1/4 acre, they're allowed to have chickens. I think it's up to about a dozen chickens within the City of Redlands. Guess how many chickens I'm allowed on my 67 acres, that parcel which is right adjacent to them. Guess how many? Can anybody guess?
None.
Yeah, 0. Can I hear that? How many?
None.
0. Okay. Okay. Running up and down that Santa Mateo Creek are a bunch of wild pigs. I don't know if you knew that, but I must see about 10 of them every single night running down the creek, usually at about 8 o'clock. They love to come into my orange grove to eat the oranges that are dropped on the ground. Guess how many pigs I'm allowed to have on my 67 acres? Again, these wild pigs are running everywhere on the farm, but how many pigs am I allowed to have on my farm? Anybody guess? 0. Okay. Now, I happen to grow the world's best tasting blackberry. It's huge, very low seed content, delicious. The vines have no spines, okay? Guess how many people I can have come to my farm till you pick the world's best blackberry? 0. You pick is not allowed. Okay. Now, I'm willing to guess that every single one of you in this room, in this organization, has taken some sort of compost class, right? Has anybody not taken a compost class? Okay, 2 people out of everybody in the room, okay? State of California is urging us, do composting in your backyard. The air quality district is saying, yeah, go ahead. You know, it's okay. The water quality district is saying, yeah, go ahead. Businesses are being forced to compost their organic waste so that it doesn't go into the landfill. Guess how much composting I can do on my farm?
Wow.
0. Okay. Now everything I grow, which is all kinds of citrus, mixed vegetables, the world's best blackberries, even some flowers, I sell to school districts. Guess how many kids can come to my farm for a paid tour of where their food is grown? 0. We sell to Yucaipa Calamasa, we sell to Redlands Unified, we sell to Rialto, we sell to San Bernardino, we sell to Riverside, we sell to Hemet, we sell to San Jacinto. Not a single, it's illegal for me to bring those kids onto my farm. And I know I'm running out of time, I'm going to give one more example. And that example is something I've forgotten. So the key point though is this coming Tuesday, 4 o'clock, before the Planning Commission, we are going to be looking at an ordinance that we call Redlands Farming Forever. Redlands farmers have gotten together, they've come up with a wish list of what they would like to see changed besides monocultural orange, and the Planning Commission is going to be considering that list, okay? We would like to have that room full of people that care about creating a local food economy, supporting local farms, getting access to not only organic food, but access to farmers that are in their community where they can look in their eye and say, is this real, honest food? And get a gut feel, yeah, this is. They can visit the farm to check themselves, okay? So it's this Tuesday, 4 p.m. I'm going to be in the back of the room. If this is something that inspires you, this is the best chance you'll ever have, probably for the rest of your lives, to make a difference with farms in Redlands. Now's the time to step up. So I'll be in the back of the room, sign-ups for information on what, where, when, what to do, the background, etc., so you can be an effective advocate this coming Tuesday. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Bob. So this is a real-world example of we have these threats and we ask, what are we doing at the Redlands level? We're considering these things now. Now think of what you had for dinner last night. Do you know where the ingredients to whatever you had came from? Let's say it was a salad. Did it come from Safeway, Costco? Did it come from Three Sisters? There's an opportunity here, like Dan and Abby were describing, to support local growers, to support neighbors. And so whether you show up at the Planning Commission to voice your opinion on these matters, you can even take even more minute steps than that, which is going to the local farmer's market, to talking to a farmer who's growing your food, to understanding where you're getting your food, who's creating it, and supporting them. I think Abby had a great line in her presentation, which was vote with your fork. Every dollar you spend, all the time you spend, you know, whether or not you prioritize going to local farmers markets, or you just look for convenience and grab it on your time from a big box store. All things to consider. There's no right or wrong answer. Our city leaders are considering these issues, and there's a lot of things to discuss about them. But just sort of talking to a farmer and understanding what their concerns are, what their needs are, or how to better support them is a great way to start. So I'm gonna bring Abby and Dan back up for Q&A. And then Bob will be in the back for Q&A after we end. And then we're also gonna do announcements for Linda, who will be discussing other ANCA-related events and other ways that you can create resilient communities here in Redlands. So Abby and Dan, you wanna come back up? And this is our Q&A portion, so if somebody has a question.
You mentioned that there was one invasive plant that was a big concern. What is that one?
There are a lot of invasives that are a concern. The one that I was talking about that is the USDA federally is working on it. So that's a good question. You can go to the USDA website and find out. The answers I don't know. But you know, as far as so that's nationwide, and that's why I don't know. As far as invasives, you know, in our region, I can talk about that. But
can we compost stuff that's been affected by the orange and fruit fly, or does it have to be double bagged and thrown out?
they don't want you to compost it. There's a chance that they could escape.
It's not true, it's not
Into the
hot enough
environment.
compost, they can
Right.
still live, okay.
Exactly.
Is it good enough to wash the rind on fruit that you get from somebody else's property? Or do you have to, is it just not good to eat?
As far as, because it might be contaminated with the fruit fly. If it is contaminated, it will have maggots or eggs, which, you know, you can eat them. You really can. They're not toxic. But sharing fruit and moving fruit potentially spreads the problem. So that's why they don't want you moving it. As far as consuming it, that's a different issue.
Another question on, you have a community garden and you want to take your stuff to your house. I was told this weekend that Riverside is allowing community garden people to double bag it, take it home to process it. Are we allowed to do that here in Redlands? For example, if I'm going to have tomatoes in my community garden, I want to make pasta sauce, I can't do it in the community garden. Whereas in Riverside, I can double bag it and take it home to do it.
I'm surprised that they're making an exception. Now, if something has been treated,
Well, this exception was a community garden meeting, and it was someone from the master garden plan I was talking to said that's they're like, shh, but this we understand. The real world is you can't do it here in the garden. If you're gonna take it home, do it safe.
they're not offering any exceptions like that. So if it's an official answer, it's sorry. This is temporary until we get a handle on it. You know, we'll be forfeiting our current year's crops. There'll be, you know, if we get a handle on it, there'll be more next year. So that's the official answer, unfortunately.
Is there any agency that's harvesting all the citrus to keep it, taking it off the trees, or are they going to leave it on the trees?
Some of it they're taking off the trees.
Is that where they find the fly?
You know, exactly their methods, I'm not an expert on. It's interesting in some neighborhoods, you know, right next door to a place where they're taking fruit off, they're leaving it on. So it just has to do with their computer models, their mapping, where they found flies, and it kind of doesn't look like it makes sense, you know, from an outsider's view.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because they are taking some fruit off of some residences across from my farm. I just don't understand the rationale, because right next to that house is my 21 acres of citrus, where they haven't said anything about taking it off. And so it's kind of, it just has all of us kind of questioning, what's the strategy here, and how is this really going to work? And I think affordability and budget is driving some of these decisions.
Do you have any authority to keep them off your property? Or if they want to come on, they're coming?
They have a special authorization to come onto your property whether you want it or not. Okay, so they can come on. They don't have to ask, they can come.
I'd like to have both of you address the question of, you kind of nature moms, so we're trying to go to the neighborhood level and also community-wide. And we have this vision, and a part of our vision is putting into place a local sustainable food system. I'd like to know what you think maybe would be the most important thing for us to focus on in the next 10 years. What would be different 10 years from now if we really made that a focus of our neighborhood and community work?
Do you want to go first?
I think we need change at lots of different levels, right? So one of the levels where we need change, where it's so incredibly difficult to imagine anything happening at all, is international and national levels. So at a minimum, even though you asked about the local food system, we need to elect people to represent us as best they can, to also be supporting a transition to a farming system. I mean, every year there's a farm bill, and that farm bill structures conventional agriculture, and even a little tiny little part of that farm bill, if there could be projects for subsidizing carbon capture instead of grain production, or instead of subsidizing insurance policies so that when there is a crop failure, if you're big, you don't suffer it, and if you're Abby, you just have to work around it. There should be ways of getting a policy to support that. I mean, we just heard from a farmer who wants a whole bunch of straightforward zoning changes so that farming systems locally can be economically viable. So that you're not dependent on a monocrop of oranges, but that you create a farm which is a community node where school children learn, and you get multiple sources of income from positive and effective kinds of activities.
That was my answer. I was going to talk about the Farm Bill, but I had to narrow it down. The Farm Bill supports subsidized commodities and not like food that's really good for us, like from the small, diverse small farmer. So that's a nationwide thing. But there's people, that can lobby, at the national level of politics. Now, at the city level, I think it's important for ANCA to work with the city to change zoning and ordinances, and also the county. The health department could make it a little bit easier. These cottage food laws that I talked about are about making it a little bit easier for people to go into business, just easing the restrictions, making sure people still aren't able, gonna get sick from food. That's their main job. But to just back off on, make it a little more affordable and a little more convenient so that they're actually supporting, this idea of people growing their own food and people, having some power and control over their food that's grown. Also, I think getting together some land in the neighborhood, maybe a vacant lot, maybe put some backyards together and start growing something that people are excited about, and doesn't have to be, typical crops. It could be, something fun, cut flowers or, medicinal herbs. There's so many things. If somebody's interested in, whatever it is, to get together and start some small gardens. Yes.
So what do you do on your farm with like the waste product? And it's like, I saw on your slide, like one of the things you grow is shallots. Obviously there's a part of that you don't eat. What do you do with that part of the plant once you pull it out of the ground?
It goes in the compost pile.
Okay, I was confused about that. So you said you use horse manure, so I was just wondering if you also use your waste.
Horse manure is kind of our base
Oh.
compost, and all the garden scraps go along with it. And come out for the tour and we'll talk more about compost. Yes?
I was wondering if there is land designated in the city of Redlands for agriculture, is there any remaining land that could be farmed, does anybody know? I mean, to be leased or?
That's a great question. I think that the city does have land in their holdings, and I think that, do you have any idea?
There were several community gardens, like there's one over by Cove Middle School. There's one, that different people are, and I don't know if they're still available or not.
No, they are.
Are they?
Yeah, they're still on, yeah. There's
Oh,
a long,
okay.
there's a long waiting list too, because I've
Oh,
got,
is it
I've got a
safe?
putt, yeah.
And I say, I know there's more, I think there's, I would say several.
Yep, well, they're gonna open up another one, they're opening more. There
Are
wasn't
they?
talk about, yeah, like by the
Okay.
university, that whole area there, they're gonna do a community garden there. The city is going to do more of that.
Okay,
It's one of the things they're really promoting.
they've been around for a long time,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, one last question for our speakers.
I guess it would be for the professor. What legislation or what is the EPA working on with these greenhouse gas emissions? What is the EPA not working on with the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture at a regulatory monitoring, that you're aware of, especially for this area, which is deeply impacted by pollution, industrial pollution, trucks, all of that.
I'm not aware of anything in particular, but that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Okay,
I'm not a policy expert.
okay.
Okay, can we give a big hand to our speakers? By a show of hands, did anybody learn something new today? Oh, wow, okay. I think almost everyone. That's wonderful. All right, we have Linda Hamilton to make some final announcements. Again, this is a community education working group event. We do monthly series here at the community center. We have an event coming up on March 20th, which is sort of like an Ask the Doctor event. We're going to have a panel of doctors, and they're going to be addressing the growing health risks related to climate change. And now I'm going to turn it over to Linda Hamilton for some final announcements.
Thank you, Aaron. And thank you. I want to begin just by thanking you all for coming tonight. I look around the room and I see a lot of you who come almost every month. Thank you for that. And also I see some new people today. It's always wonderful to have some new people. And some of you brought friends tonight, and that's really great because if you know ANCA at all, you know we're trying to find any which way we can to increase awareness in our community about what's happening, because if we don't understand what's happening, we're not going to know what to do to address it. So that's so important to us. And then secondly, is just how do we live more sustainably? We have to learn that together. We have to learn together in groups like this and also in our neighborhoods, which we hope to get going in the next year or so. So I want to tell you about an event coming up very soon now. Earth Day 2024. How many of you actually participated in Earth Day 2023? Okay, not as many as I thought. Okay, so your opportunity is coming up this year. So Earth Day, we started this last year. We call it a day of climate action. And the purpose of this day is to give people an experience of what it takes to live sustainably. So we have all different kinds of projects going on around the community that are hosted by people like you and other organizations in town. So there are, and the other emphasis, of course, is just how we can heal the planet together. So there's 3 things that you can do to be involved in Earth Day this year, and I hope you'll all really consider this seriously. One is to host a climate action project. If you're a member of a group, you might get your group to do that. You live in a neighborhood, get a group of neighbors to get together and plan some sort of action that you can take. A group of friends, anything that you can think of, but host a project. The second is just you can participate in the project. And all of these projects will go on our website. you can go in and look at this whole array of projects, and you can sign up, there'll be a way to sign up through Eventbrite for the ones that you want to attend. And then finally, tonight my plea is we need volunteers to help with the celebration on Earth Day. So the agenda for the day is from 9 to 12. We have these projects going on all over town. And then from 12:30 until 2:30, we have a celebration. This year it's going to be at the Redlands Bowl. It's for the whole community, but it's particularly for all of the people who have hosted and participated in projects. And there'll be lots of information tables there. There'll be a live band, free food, so it'll be a wonderful community event. So please put Saturday, April 20th on your calendar and plan to participate. And these are some ideas here very quickly about what you could possibly do with a small group, and there's a list of those that you can take home with you if you're interested in doing something like that. And finally, I already talked about volunteering to help with the celebration, but those are all our volunteers from last year. I know a couple people in this room are in that picture. And I have to say, some of you remember Callie from last year. Callie, raise your hand. Visiting back from Austria, she's come back tonight, and I see her face right down there. And there will be a volunteer orientation on Wednesday, April 17th at 6 p.m. So there won't be a monthly like this in April. There will be a volunteer orientation for those of you who are helping with the celebration. I think that is it. Oh yes, and one other thing. Because you are ANCA people, you are invited to the 3rd annual Climate Teach-In at the University of Redlands. It's going to be a really special event, and that's coming up the day, it's on March 21st, next month, which is the day after our event here, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. You can see the agenda there. So you are very, very much invited to attend that as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and thank you everyone again for coming out. That concludes our evening. If you have a moment, I suggest stopping at the resource table. There's a great book on climate diet. It's 50 ways to reduce your climate carbon footprint. And then you may have seen when you came in that there's a program evaluation form. If you have a moment, your feedback helps us further develop these programs so they're more engaging, interesting, successful. So thank you again for all coming out.